All right. We have, it's either, I'm going to assume it's Job. Wow. Calling in from California is a theist, pronouns are him, proving God through events from the book of Revelation and make connections from those events to our timeline. Hey, Job, how are you? Did you hear the last call that I had where I talked about prophecy?
Oh, yes, I really did.
Cool. Let's start there. Let's say that there are things in the book of Revelation that you think have come true in reality. How does that prove God, even if it were correct?
Well, because those events came true, so that would prove that the people that predicted it, that it came from the God.
Okay. Before you called, if I had written down, Job is going to say that the predictions coming true is proof of God, would that be a prediction that came true?
Yes.
Okay. If that prediction came true, would that prove that I was God or got information from God?
Not necessarily.
Cool. So if it's not necessarily the case, why does a prediction from Revelation coming true prove God?
So there's a couple responses I do to that. One is I would then look at other holy books and look at the predictions made from there. And then I compare those predictions to the book of Revelation.
Job, we're having a very difficult we're having a very difficult time understanding you. It sounds like you're using a voice modulator or something, but you already acknowledged that that a prediction merely being correct isn't enough to confirm that a God exists. So I'm asking you, if there are several predictions in the book of Revelation that are in fact true, how can we conclude that that's because there's a God?
I think that there's some verses in the book of Revelations that talk about more like natural disasters throughout the timeline, like more.
Job, you're not fucking listening to me in the slightest. You already acknowledged that a prediction merely being correct is not confirmation of God, correct?
Well, no, not necessarily.
I'm sorry, Job, this is a yes or no. You already acknowledged that a prediction merely coming true is not sufficient to conclude that the prediction came from God. You already did that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we have two predictions that come true, does that confirm God?
No. Well, I think the more predictions that come true, the more.
Job, if we have two predictions that come true, does that prove God?
No, not necessarily.
Cool. What if we have 5 predictions that come true?
First thing we're going to go again, bud. Okay?
Job?
Yeah,
do you have to leave?
What?
Do you have to leave? Was that someone talking to you that you had to do something?
No, I'm moving out of my house.
How many
predictions? I think someone was just walking by.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many predictions coming true are sufficient to confirm that those predictions came from God?
So like the 12 disciples had those predictions come
Job, I asked a very specific questions, and the word disciple is not relevant to any answer to that question. The question was, how many predictions would need to come true to make it reasonable to conclude that those predictions came from God?
I'd say about 90% of them need to come true.
90%. So if I make 2 predictions, both of them come true, does that mean it's from God?
No.
Well, that's more than 90%. So why would, let's assume the Bible makes 10 predictions and 9 of them come true. You're saying the fact that 9 out of 10 predictions coming true confirms that those came from God. How did you rule out other possibilities?
So this is where I was saying about other holy books. They have other predictions of them.
No, Job, other holy books are irrelevant. All holy books are irrelevant. I'm asking a question about how you can confirm that 90% accuracy on predictions is enough to conclude that a God is responsible. How did you rule out other explanations? How did you rule out coincidence? How did you rule out time travel?
So I read the book of Revelations and I compared it to other holy books predictions.
Job, I swear you're going to answer my fucking question or I'm going to hang up on you. I don't need you to talk about other holy books. I don't need you to talk about Revelation. All of that is irrelevant. I'm talking about methods of evaluating claims to determine if they are likely to be true. How did you rule out time travel as a possible explanation for predictions coming true?
Great question. You can't really, you have a point there.
Okay. How did you rule out coincidence?
I think because the more predictions that come true, the more it's not a coincidence. You see what I mean?
Oh, no, I would agree that coincidence becomes less plausible. However, how do you rule it out was my question.
You can't really prove that, like all the possibilities of why that would be.
How do you conclude that it's more likely that a prediction came from God than that it's coincidence?
That I don't know how to answer that question.
It's honestly a hard one because even most people can't answer it. But how about we try the converse? If God is the source of these prophecies, how many of those prophecies will be false?
I say probably about maybe a couple here and there.
I apologize, Aaron. I think that was a brilliant question, and I'm glad you raised it. But and I know Aaron's point. I'm gonna skip that. Let you get it. It just said that 90% would be confirming God, but instead of saying 10% would be wrong if it was from God, you went with a couple.
I mean, like, I would need to hear Aaron's question again.
Go ahead.
I'll repeat
because I know what your follow-up is.
Yeah. So, if God is the source of these prophecies, how many of these prophecies will be false, will not come true?
Well, God can't lie, so see, here's the thing. God, he sometimes chooses not to tell us what's going to happen because he wants
Not that. That's not what I'm saying, though. My question is how many of the prophecies from God will actually be false? It sounds like you're going to say 0. because God can't lie. God won't misinform us. If he says this is going to happen, that thing will happen, correct?
Correct.
All right. So in that case, if a holy book does come from God, a number of false prophecies sounds like it necessarily will be 0, which means even one false prophecy throws it out as divine in source.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned specifically the book of Revelation, and if I may give a quick reading from chapter 22, verse 12, this is actually being said by Jesus according to there, "Behold, I come quickly." This being written somewhere in the 90s AD. In other words, how long has it been?
It's been 2,000 years.
Is that quick?
That was a very long time.
In that case, I'd say that's a failed prophecy. Said I'd come quickly, and literally tens, if not hundreds of generations have gone by, and we're still waiting, some patiently more than others.
So here's the thing. There's these things called the end times, and the end times don't really happen until like long after. Like,
Jesus said, "I come quickly." He hasn't come, and that's because this ain't something quick. That's a false prophecy on the author of the book of Revelation here. So I would say that's one false prophecy.
okay, so
Similarly, if you want to go to the other books of the New Testament, if you go to Mark chapter 13, Jesus says, this generation, the generation he's talking to, will not pass until all these, thunder, lightning, fire and brimstone stuff happens. This generation will not pass. In other words, the time of Jesus himself, again, 2,000 years later,
What?
nothing.
Show the line? Paul, show the line? What are you
I don't. Where's that background noise?
That's coming from the caller.
It's on Job's side. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to mute you for a second, Job, because we're getting some background noise. I'll unmute you in just a second, Job. Aaron, what was your last question again? I'm sorry, I got distracted by the audio.
I was just repeating that basically the same sort of failed prophecy exists in the Gospel, specifically in Mark 13, and it gets repeated elsewhere, that Jesus himself said, this generation will not pass until all of these things happen. All these things are fulfilled. So Jesus telling the people alive in his own time, I'll be back while you're still alive. Paul thought similar things according to his letters, and they were all wrong. Because we're still here. We are the disproof of the Bible.
Do not do it.
Job, I'm not going to be able to keep you on the line if you can't get to some place where there's not a background noise like this.
You don't want it. You know what I mean?
Job, are you able to get more quiet, or am I going to have to hang up? Okay, I'm hanging up. Goodbye. Apologies. I can't do that. I can't have weird, obnoxious background noises, conversations. I mean, I don't care that the dude behind was dropping F-bombs. I'll drop F-bombs at the drop of a fucking hat. But if you're calling in, try to get somewhere where you're going to be less distracted and we're going to be less distracted. But here's the thing on prophecy. Somebody in chat asked, turn this around on Matt and ask him how many times in a row someone have to flip heads before, he can. I didn't see how the final thing was worded. Here's the thing. As part of a magic show, if I get 300 or 400 people in an audience, I'd love to give all of them a penny and have them flip. And you have everybody stand up and you have them all flip. And everybody who flips heads stays standing. And everybody who flips tails sits down. So you have them all flip and you lose a chunk of your audience right off the bat sitting down. And you do it again. And you do it again. And you do it again. You're getting fewer and fewer people. But in a large enough audience, and we know from the math how to predict the likelihood of this for audiences of certain sizes, which is why I want an audience of about 300 to 400 to really do this. Because in an audience of about 300 or 400, you're probably going to end up with someone standing up in the audience who's the last person, or maybe the last couple of people, and they have flipped a coin, a fair coin, in front of everybody and managed to get 7, 8, or 9 heads in a row. That's not uncommon in that scenario. And because in a room that size, I know that can happen. Maybe I'm interacting with that one person one-on-one and they flip 9 in a row. For me, it depends on the size of the audience. For an individual, I start getting suspicious at probably 4, 5, or 6 and paying a little more attention and investigating. It's like, hey, can I see that coin? You know, can we make sure that it's a fair coin? Has it got heads on both sides or whatever? And then we keep going. And if he does it 13 times in a row, I'm going to be reasonably suspicious that there's something else going on. But then it's my job to confirm that this isn't fair. In a single occurrence of one person flipping a coin, that is not a sample size that demonstrates anything. But if this person is claiming that they can consistently flip heads, then we ask, under what circumstances can you do this? How many times can you do this? With what regularity can you do it? How much beyond chance, because chance would suggest that 50% of your tosses roughly for fair coins are going to be heads, 50% are tails. How much beyond chance does your ability allow you to go? And then you do the testing. And as soon as somebody demonstrates, this is how the JREF would go by doing it. I'm simplifying it quite a bit. But you come up with a test protocol and you test the person. We can maybe never be certain whether or not someone's cheating, but we can say this person was consistently able to beat the odds that we know to be the case for a fair coin in this circumstance. How they did it is separate. And that's what we were getting to with the prophecies and stuff. No matter how many prophecies come true, you can't make a claim about how they came true until you can demonstrate evidence for that explanation as the most probable one. It's the same for the origin of the universe. Maybe the universe happened by some natural process that we don't understand. Maybe the universe was created by some being that still exists or doesn't exist. There's various possibilities. And I say possibilities in the logical sense. I'm not saying that a God is possible, because I don't think that's been demonstrated either. I don't think it's been demonstrated that any sort of intelligent creator existing outside of the space-time universe, we haven't demonstrated that's possible. But you can look at that and say, no matter how many times it happens, we may not be able to confirm this until we get evidence showing the likelihood of a causal connection. And that requires God to be a candidate explanation. And the way something becomes a candidate explanation is through a couple different methods, but one of them is by A, demonstrating that it exists and it can in fact interact in the way that you're proposing, and B, demonstrating that even if there isn't up to current date a way to detect this, but that it must be there. So you're going down the route of there's a dead body. Who killed it? The butler. At least we know the butler exists. There was a butler. The butler had, means, motive, and opportunity. But that alone doesn't confirm. But it does raise the likelihood. And certainly the butler is a more likely candidate than somebody, a 2-year-old that lives 500,000 or 50,000 miles away, like on another planet. Or, well, I said 50,000 miles was stupid, and so was another planet. Ignore that. You have to make a list of candidate explanations, and so far, God isn't even a candidate explanation. That's why when somebody says, "Oh, how many times would flipping a coin make you think something else is going on?" It depends on what other factors I know about. Am I in a room with some of my magician friends? Because if they flip heads 3 times in a row, I'm already suspicious that something's going on. It is, hey, here's my coin. I can flip that and I can make it land heads every time. And if you believe I just landed heads, you're already wrong. Anybody can pick the coin up and show you whatever they want. There are so many ways to manipulate things, both intentionally and unintentionally. And coin tosses are easy to manipulate. There's an episode of Penn and Teller Fool Us where somebody comes on and fools them with a coin, and they like it so much that they bought his method so they could use it in there. But there are ways to control the flip of a coin.
One minor deficiency with your analogy, though, is that with a coin, a fair coin, it's 50-50. With the prophecies Job was bringing up was wars and natural disasters. That's not flipping heads and predicting heads or tails. That's flipping a coin and saying a side will show up.
Yeah. It's like, hey, I'm going to make it, or worse. You want to impress me? Take this 20-sided die, this one here that belongs to me, and roll it. All you got to do is say, I'm going to roll a number. Say what the number is. I'm going to roll 5. Roll it and have it come up 5. Do that 5 times in a row, and we can start talking about whether or not you have a power.
Hey, if you liked this video, why don't you click that like button?
And if you didn't
That's
like
what
it,
you would say.
subscribe.
Okay.
You didn't even give me a chance.
There was such a long pause.
What are you on speed or something? I barely had a chance.
Let's try again. Hey, I hope you liked. Hey, I hope you. Fuck. Hey there. I hope you liked that clip. Hey, I hope you liked that clipper just now, the one that you just watched with your eyes. If you did like it, why don't you click that like button?
And if you didn't like it, tell Jimmy to go fuck himself.
Hey, I hope you liked that clip right now. If you did like it, why don't you hit that like button?
And if you didn't like it, go ahead and subscribe anyway.